This is one of those topics that gets me extremely fired up. It's one of these videos where you can't cherry pick information. You can't just watch part of it. You can't just take part of it out of context. You need to listen to the whole thing, because not only is it hurting you, it's hurting every other person around you. Okay, what is the thing that we're always hearing in today's world? We're running out of resources. We're being too harsh to the environment. Coal, natural gas, oil, all like the fossil fuels, they're running out. We're looking at the thing in the United States right now, going back to coal energy and all this kind of stuff. But what we're forgetting, what everybody is missing, is it's not the coal that we're missing out on. It's not the oil, it's not the natural gas, it's not the solar power. That's not the energy we're losing. That's not the fuel in today's world that's being cut short. The fuel in today's world that's being cut short is very clearly and only creativity. Every person on the planet has that potential. That's what, 7-8 billion people close to it that have this potential creativity, and almost none of them will ever use it in their lives, or it gets cut out of them. Because here's what happens: we all go to school, and when we're kids, creativity is in abundance, right? We go out into the backyard. We don't need toys as kids. You go out to the backyard, you pick up that stick, and that's a legendary sword. But as we get older and older, that stick now just becomes a piece of wood laying in the backyard. It's no longer a legendary sword. We need the action figures, we need the Xbox, we need the TV to help us be imaginative, to help us create things, because we can't create it ourselves. We need to see it. We need to have it brought to us. We need the choices made for us. And then eventually we all stop reading, because reading is too slow. We can't imagine it in our mind anymore, where we can't create what the words on the page are trying to tell us. We got to go to the movies. We got to watch it on the big screen. The creativity, we lose it as we're growing up, and it's not just coincidence. It's not coincidence that creativity is in lack today. It's not coincidence, because everything around us is pulling away and sucking away at that creativity. I watched this TED Talk with Sir Ken Robinson. He's an international kind of guy that goes around and looks at the educational system, and what he said was that in every educational system around the planet, every public educational system around the planet, the arts are put last. You have all your core stuff at the top. You have your math, your science, your history, your languages, your English, all that stuff at the top. It's those core subjects, right? And then at the very bottom, you have sports in the middle. At the very bottom is the arts. It's always the arts. It never fails. Because what is it school's trying to do? School's trying to mold us all to be into university students, right? It's cutting out everything at the bottom. It's trying to push us into university students, and creativity is cut out. Despite the fact that every school is pushing kids out of the arts, it's trying to keep kids away from being the most creative selves they can be. Because when was the last time you were truly able to be creative in math class, all right? Even if kids get into art class or music class, they're still not allowing to really be their most creative selves. Because let's take a look at the high school level. You get into a high school music class, I'm in them, so I know about it. You get into a high school music class, be it jazz or wind ensemble, the higher you go, the more restraint that's put on your creativity. The less creative you're allowed to be. Okay? You're in a lower jazz group, if you're at the solo, just solo, man. Just play your horn. Do whatever you gotta do, right? But the higher you get, you gotta play in a certain way, in a certain setting. And the problem is, they're telling you, okay, you gotta play like this band, you gotta sound like this band, or in art classes, you gotta paint and be like this painter. Studying the greats is more important than anything else on the planet. If you want to be good at something, we study, in jazz. If you're in jazz, the Count Basie Orchestra, Duke Ellington. You study these great, founding fathers of jazz, so to speak. Or if you're in art, Picasso, Van Gogh, all these like super talented artists. But then the problem is we're replicating their work. So at the end of the day, we don't know who we are anymore. We don't know our creativity, because we're not allowed to be creative. We just have to create what fits in the guidelines of the rubric. And that's what a lot of people forget, is when they're in these classes, especially the teachers, is that you're not a conductor of the group, you're an instructor of the class. You're trying to grow creativity, kind of trying to allow creativity to spread and grow, and allow these kids to be the most creative selves they can be, because they're not getting it anywhere else. There's great musicians that nowadays they only play their own music at their concerts, which makes sense, right? But then we're not allowed to do that in school, because we're not at that point yet. But the question is, how many kids are going to go on to be professional artists? How many kids are going to go on to be professional musicians? And the answer is none of them, because mom and dad are telling them that they need to go on and go to college and get a degree and be the IT guy, or be the electrical engineer, or be the nuclear engineer, maybe be a doctor, go be a lawyer. And it's not mom and dad's fault, right? Because that's what they knew. When they were growing up, they went to college, they went and got degrees because their parents before them didn't have them. That was the next step up in the evolutionary chain. But the problem is, that's all that older generation, that's what they tell us to do because it's what they know. And the problem is, so our creativity gets cut down in school, and we find ourselves going to university for those things I just mentioned. But the problem is, again, in 20 years, those degrees are going to be obsolete. Ken Robinson, again, talks about this. In 20 years, what required a bachelor's degree is going to require a master's. In 20 years, what required a master's is going to require a PhD or a doctorate. Okay? Because when our parents went to school, when they got degrees, 20, 30 years ago, that they were the outliers. They were the special group because a lot of people didn't have them, right? They were the first generation that really consistently went to college and got the degrees. So they were great. But the problem is now everyone's going to college. Everyone's getting degrees. So in 20 years, degrees are obsolete. The fact that you have a degree means absolutely nothing, because so does the next guy, and so do the next 20 guys down the line from you. Everyone has a degree. So in 20 years from now, having the degree isn't going to make a difference. Being creative is what's going to make the difference. It's what can you bring to the table that no one else can, right? So the fact of the matter is, Napoleon Hill talks about it. He talked about in his book Think and Grow Rich, he talks about the people that were chosen from universities to go higher up on the corporate chain faster were not the kids getting straight A's. It was the kids who were personable, who were known around the campus, who created things, who were part of stuff, who grew things to a higher level. And that's what's going to come down to is degrees and trying to push our kids to the university route as schools are doing. It's focusing on those core subjects, not worrying about creativity, not worrying about growing the arts. It's just pushing kids to that university route to get the degree. But the degree is not going to matter. Sooner or later, you get to the point where it just doesn't matter anymore that you have a degree, because so does everybody else. And like I said before, when we actually do get the kids into the art classes, the kids aren't allowed to be creative anymore. They're so pulled back and restrained because you got to do this and you got to do that. Yeah, you're going to take inspiration from great people. I take inspiration from Tony Robbins. I take inspiration from Gary Vee. I take inspiration from Ty Lopez and Napoleon Hill and Andrew Carnegie and all these great people. Doesn't mean I'm going to build a business like them. So in school, why are you telling kids to play a music exactly like that band or paint the picture exactly like that painter? You take inspiration, but you got to use your own creativity. You got to be yourself. And we're cutting that out. It's completely out of our educational system. And sooner or later, if the arts aren't cut out of the schools, creativity will be cut out of the arts. And once we lose creativity, we lose the one thing that means to make us human. Because that's what separates us from everybody else, or everything else. It's the ability to create and make the great things that we have. That's what separates us from everything else. We can solve any problem on the planet as long as we have a creativity. And yet that is the least focused thing nowadays, is our creativity. Everything else can be replaced, but our creativity can't. Once we lose our creativity, once that's gone, we stop evolving. We stop growing. We need to focus back. We need to focus back on our creativity. And that's something we're going to stress here, is helping you find that creativity. Because I said in the beginning of this video, it's not just hurting you. It's hurting every other human being on this planet. Every human being that's going to come on this planet, right? Everything is being hurt because of the human's lack of creativity. We're losing everything. We're just going and doing what everybody tells us to do. If we're even going to university. If we're not just sitting home and playing video games 24/7, when we're 30 plus years old, if we're even going to get jobs, if we're even doing that anymore, we've lost the creativity. We've lost that drive. And that's what we need to achieve back. That's the one resource that actually is being depleted at an astonishing rate, and it's actually going to affect the world in a much grander scale than anything else will. We need to get our creativity back to set us back, to keep improving. Because, and last note, when was the last time you saw anything improve? Or really change? In a lot of ways, we are in an inventive plateau. Everything is just a slight variation or a slight improvement on what was created last. When was the last time you saw a new thing? Every phone, just a slight improvement on the last one, or a copy of another dealer. You know, even some of our greatest businesses are no longer showing that innovative creativeness that we've seen or we know them for. We gotta get our creativity back. It's the one thing that's gonna separate us from everything else. Creativity is our most valuable resource. Let's get it back.